This video is sponsored by Amazon Coins. Amazon Coins is a digital currency that you can use for in-game purchases on apps found in the Amazon Appstore, just like Epic 7. With Amazon Coins, you'll rack up huge discounts, up to 20% off. With Sylvan Sage Vivian finally being released after such a long time, you might consider topping off your Mystic medals the next time you shop with Amazon Coins. You can also try downloading and playing Epic 7 on Windows 11 through the Amazon App Store. However, this feature is currently only available in the US. Amazon Coins are currently available in the United States, the UK, Germany, France, Japan, Italy, Spain, and Australia. Use my link found in the description below to support me and the channel while getting these great discounts in your next in-game purchase. The link will also provide you with step-by-step instructions on getting the Amazon App Store and Epic 7 installed on your device. Hey guys, welcome to another session of Epic 7. This is my initial thoughts video for Sharun. With her release video in terms of her info, we actually got a teaser that Summer Charlotte will be the new limited hero coming for this summer, and because they have kept all that preview stuff under wraps, and actually while I'm making this video, we're under maintenance right now. I don't know if data miners will be able to spot what her kit will be next week, but for whatever reason Smilegate decided that no, they don't want to show it together, even though the Summer Charlotte is going to be previewed next week alongside of being released next week too. So it's kind of feels like a really rushed kind of thing going on. I don't know why. This is kind of a break in their pattern usually, but I suppose it's just like they don't want to double up on two 5-star RGB heroes, I suppose. Either way, without talking about that, let's talk about Sharun herself. Being a Soul Weaver, I think surprised a lot of people. We haven't really had a Soul Weaver, especially a Nat 5 Soul Weaver, in a really long time. If you don't count Amelia, like the last one was like DN or Maid Chloe, right? I think. But if we're talking about a core, you know, non-limited RGB Soul Weaver, we haven't really seen one in a long time. So I think this was surprising. And I know that there are jokes to saying that they haven't released a Soul Weaver in so long that they don't know how to release a Soul Weaver anymore. I will have to say that, like, you know, before we even get to the kit, like, she doesn't, on the surface level, she doesn't really function like a Soul Weaver. But we have to remember that they've also changed the archetypes, right? Like, see Lilius being a warrior, but realistically, if you think about it, she's more of like a traditional ranger or a mage, right? Opening debuffer. So like I definitely think that they're just like playing around. In my opinion, they're playing around more around the artifacts. So basically, like, if Sharun was a mage, and maybe even a mage with a new star sign, because I think there are still star signs that are untouched under the mage class. Like, if she was a mage, I think it would make like 100% sense, right? Like, she does debuffs and all that stuff, and of course, like, mages have supportive elements too. And you look at like Vivian and all that stuff. So like, you would have pinned her as a mage, but the very fact that she doesn't heal makes people be like, oh look, she's a Soul Weaver, she can't even heal, haha. But if you have played Epic 7 for as long as I have, back when DN used to be, well, when DN was released, there was the same comment, right? That haha, she can't heal. And even after, you know, the buffs, after the EE, she still can't heal. She can heal with an artifact. But then same with Sharun, right? But I think, like, my initial thoughts is that, like, I'm considering that maybe you don't even need to heal, you know? Maybe you play how you would play like a C Lilius, right? Like I said, like, warriors traditionally in the past was like, they do damage. And even if they're supportery, they still do damage, like a Holiday Euphine, right? Like, you still want to build some damage. But like, C Lilius changed the spectrum of what you expect in a role, especially in a class rather. So like, she becomes like full on like support. Same with like Flan, right? Like, rangers used to be like supportery, but they could do damage, I suppose, you know. So I don't feel too uncomfortable that they're changing this thing, and especially especially like I said before, like DN in year 1, it was very questionable, right? Until people started realizing that, well, anti-crit buff, the turn cycling was OP. Like back then, like CR boosting 50% on her own turn was like nothing even heard of, right? Like in terms of like she has 3, she 50% CR boost. Like Sharun has that too, right? So it's just like, I don't know. I'm gonna remain kind of skeptical on the, like, she's really bad. I will say if you measure her against what she has to face in World Arena right now, she's considered a slower hero. In terms of like she doesn't bring enough momentum to your team. So like right now, cleave, aggro, fast-paced standard, even if you want to call it that, is pretty predominant. So not a lot of players just like full on default, let's bunker down. You usually start drafting fast and then you start drafting slower, right? Unless your opponent's drafting too slow, then you start drafting faster. But there's that kind of interplay where she feels like she can only fit in a slow comp for herself, but then also versus slow people. So that part I think is why people rate her to be weak. But anyways, I talked a lot about that in terms of I wanted to set those philosophies out in the open, like right away. You know, DN was misunderstood, but realistically, like, you know, I'm realistic as well. I can definitely see her being not as prominent or useful. So I'm gonna say that right away. But either way, Virgo Soul Weaver so shares the same sign as Maid Chloe, I believe. With the new stat adjustments after the Soul Weaver buffs, we're looking at 106 speed, 5,340 health. The attack is really not important at all. I don't know what her damage mods will be like, but I highly doubt it's worth investing the Mola into her in terms of like the actual raw damage portion. So you probably won't see a critical hit damage build, because it's just really the S3 that it will benefit in terms of damage per turn. Speed is 106, like I said, but the defense is 720, right? So 720 is insane, right? 720 is like actually really good. This is not Ruel level, of course, but it is I don't know if this is the second highest defense Soul Weaver. If you guys know in the comments, definitely leave it there. 720 is very high. That's all I have to say. That's like Crow level, right? It is very high defense, and then and you have, you know, no wasted crit rate, no wasted crit damage, of course, because Maid Chloe, but you have 18% effectiveness. Now, when I watched this in the patch preview stream, I looked at the imprint, I'm like, whoa, 27 effectiveness? Okay, that's really odd, right? Because like most Soul Weavers released now is just like, oh, HP percent, and ER, right? That's what you would expect. So when I saw the effectiveness, I'm like, okay, we're in for a surprise. So and I would say I am surprised. First things first is skill 2. It is a passive. That means it's sealable by Archdemon Shadow. And like I said before, like the kind of play style that if you use her, you might run into someone who plays just as slow as you, so Archdemon Shadow. So that is something that you have to be aware of course. That would be one of her weaknesses out of the many weaknesses that she potentially has. But let's just continue. So just trust me. At the end of the enemy's turn, for each buff granted to the enemy has a 5% chance to increase combat readiness of the caster by 20%. Okay, so 5% chance for each buff, increase combat readiness by 20%. In the showcase, they previewed, I think they used DN. Hold on, I have the screenshot right here. Yeah, they used DN and they did the S3 first, right? So that's 8 buffs, so that's 40% chance. Now, that's still pretty high RNG, right? Now, if they have, let's say, a DN, but like a couple heroes are on immunity, then yeah, you increase that slightly. Maybe, let's say, a 50% chance on turn 1. That's a pretty low chance, I would say, right? If you are trying to benefit from, you know, the CR boost on turn 1, yeah, you're not gonna be too, like, you might not get it at all, right? So like, again, it goes back to her kit. Like, are you relying on that CR boost on turn 1? If the answer is no, then this is not a really bad passive. If the answer is yes, or yes, it would add to her kit to make me actually value her, then the percentage based CR boost is really bad. It's only good because it's not limited to turn. So sometimes there's like passives, like for example, like Politis's Astral Guide saying like, you know, once every 2 turns, whatever, has an actual cooldown, right? So this in a sense kind of reacts to let's almost like opposite of Dilibet. You know, that's the best example I can think of right now. I'm pretty sure there are other ones, or like a little mini Sage Ball. Okay, but Sage Ball like just always has it, but it's like more of like kind of like an opposite Dilibet. Either way, if DN, because like 3-turn buffs, or if you're just relying on the combat readiness, you know, any buffer on the team, they have like 2 buffs. If it's AoE buffs, even better. If they have passive buffs like Remnant Violet, or a Payra constantly has the buffs up, and let's just assume that the Payra doesn't restrict you, then you'll constantly have combat readiness, right? So at the end of an enemy's turn, so just keep that in mind. It on first turn in the example that they showed, in my opinion, that's kind of weak. But if you're talking about subsequent turns, which again, it leans into that she has to be played in a more standard draft, then it could be good, right? Because 20% CR boost is really amazing if you think about it, right? It's like a better Warhorn, but with RNG, you know what I mean? So yeah, and then at the end of the turn, so end of her turn, grants so it's like a double mechanic in this passive. At the end of the turn, so her turn, grants a random buff and a barrier to the ally except the caster with the highest attack for 1 turn. Barrier strength proportional to the caster's max health. Now, I am making this recording before the data mine is released. I don't know what the data mine will say about the barrier scaling. I would imagine it's not super amazing. It is proportional to the caster's max health, which means that she's gonna be fighting for a ton of stats. Like, are you gonna put 100 effect resist on her with some effectiveness, or are you gonna go heavy effectiveness, which I probably wouldn't recommend, especially if you have triple S of her, assuming you're like an Omega Whale. Because the question is like, why would you have triple S of her in the beginning? In my opinion, she's not a meta breaking hero. The barrier strength is gonna play I would say a pretty decent factor, a key factor. But just keep in mind that the combat readiness at the end of the enemy's turn, if they're buffed, has a chance, and at the end of her own turn then grants the buff. Alright, so outside of her being sealed, outside of your highest attacker having unbuffable on them, this is a for sure thing. So kind of like a Solitaria that helps a teammate out. What of course that barrier reminds me of is kind of like a Rise of Monarch, right? Rise of Monarch honestly really fell off. I don't see any knight really wielding that to a very successful degree, but you know, if you're playing kind of like a standard draft, Ross might be one of your favorite go-to knights, as he is to many, and then maybe Sharun there, right? So you have like Omega protection on different turns for your DPS in the back. Alright, so let's say for example you're going standard, maybe you have a very strong counter Landy, and they're really, your opponents are really like, their draft is really dependent on single target, like high single target damage and stuff like that. I can see this coming in like pretty nice. My issue is that the random buff part, this is like you know, say what you will about the RNG with the combat readiness boost. In my opinion, I think it has merit, especially if the game proceeds along and your opponents have a ton of buffs. I think you're gonna get a couple CR boosts here and there, so all good in my opinion. I think the random buff part is an additional layer of RNG I wish that they didn't have. If it was like always attack buff or something, or at least some better, more interesting buffs, I think it would have a lot more merit. Like for example, like Bellion self buffs randomly on the start of her turn. And in Bellion's case, it doesn't really matter what she gets, and it would still be like, you know, pretty good for her turn, right? Because realistically, Bellion can function without the crit rate buff, without the effectiveness buff. But once she gets them, like if you're not 100% crit rate, or you can actually pin down like a DN with, you know, maybe only 100 ER or something like that. Like once you get them, those random buffs, like it feels like they're more useful. Here, I think the main issue is the critical hit rate one. That would be to me considered a dud. because if you're drafting a very high damage dealer, ideally you already had 100% crit rate. So the crit rate buff, in my opinion, and especially at the end of her turn, unless you build her really fast, like on speed set, a speed set like really fast, like 250 speed, I don't even know if you can get those kind of stats though. With enough stats, maybe just enough ER or whatever. I'm basing it off like what a maid Chloe would look like. And then coupled with CR boost, maybe like cycling that random buff isn't too bad. But if you're going for what I think she should probably be on a counter set, in RTA you get a 7 speed buff right now with the current frenzy. So like a counter set on her with her base speed, you know, maid Chloe's base speed, it's not too bad. So counterplay might be a decent one for her. Again, drafting into standard. But then that goes to be like, okay, does she get enough turns to kind of cycle into better buffs, right? So attack buff, in my opinion, probably the best, depending on what type of DPS she's kind of supporting there. Critical hit damage, okay. Lower value in terms of the attack, but maybe if your damage dealer is APOC Ravi or something, the critical hit damage could come in play. Although attack buff is pretty good on her too. Continuous healing, of course, just a nice benefit. I suppose it's like a reminder that she is a healer, or at least a soul weaver. I wouldn't say healer, soul weaver. But the critical hit rate is probably the biggest issue for me. Skill enhanced, if you're going to invest in her, of course I think the barrier is going to be that important though. 30% barrier on top of whatever the scaling of her current barrier is. Again, I don't know the answer to that. Anyways, I spent a lot of time on the S2. Skill 3, May You Perish, attacks all enemies, decreasing buff durations by 1 turn, before inflicting decreased speed, so speed down, and then Venom for 2 turns. Increase combat range of the caster by 50%. So this is not a non-attack skill. Her S2 doesn't function as a non-attack skill, but she does rely on CR boost quite a bit. So Politis on the field, especially again, standard fight would be like if it's like a bruiser or what we call degen Politis, then she's not going to be super effective, right? She's going to be a bit weak towards a Politis, a degen one, because there's so much of her kit, in my opinion, Sharun's, relies on CR boost or a consistent CR boost, and if she's suppressing it, that's not really good. But again, let's say 1 for 1, increase combat range of the caster by 50% on an S3, the same as DN. So back to the example that they were showing in their video, is that, you know, DN, you know, she does the buffs because she's faster, right? And then Sharun's build kind of slow. She'll let's say leverage herself in terms of the CR boost based on DN speed, and gets the turn, right? Conceptually, I think Smilegate thought that, you know, that was pretty cool, and I think it is pretty cool. But again, RNG. But yeah, so if you can decrease the buff duration, and then you can do Venom, you increase the combat readiness. But the thing is, of course, like even in their example, is not flawless, because DN's like second turn, especially if she's on Megara's tome, she cuts and then she barriers, right? So cleanse. So cleanses away the Venom, and I think this is probably a big disappointment for most players, is that she's relying on a debuff to really be kind of effective, right? Because if you think about her buff aspects are not super strong. Like so it feels like Sharun's like she's CR boosting, but then to what effect? You know what I mean? I think that's what most players are saying, like, oh, that's really bad. Conceptually, if Venom can be used, so like this of course defaults Sharun to like a last pick sort of hero, 4th, 5th pick sort of hero, you know, it depends on if you were first pick or the second pick. Like, so 4th, 5th pick hero, and you have to make sure that they don't have a cleanser, you know. The issue is that with the meta cleansers right now, they're so powerful that people are drafting them as just as like a reflex, right? Like it's not more about like, oh, you have debuffs, let me draft a cleanser now. Like cleansers right now, at least at DN, ML Kaorik, and maybe Amelia, like they're strong because of different purposes, right? They're healing, they have barrier, they have you know, in Kaorik's case he has the debuff, you know, strip and all that stuff. So like they have a lot more versatility So in terms of like Sharun, unfortunately, you know what? I saw that when I saw the S3 icon, I thought it was uncleansable. That would have been a game changer in my opinion, but then that would be too OP, okay? But in standard fight, okay, just make that clear. So Venom at the start of the turn receives damage equivalent to 10% of the max health and is afflicted with the injuries proportional to the damage suffered, and a Venom effect applies to heroes only. So Venom is really just an upgraded poison. Instead of 5% health, it is 10%. If you didn't play Epic Summon at the beginning, poison used to be 10% of max health, which is pretty OP, but they nerfed it. So 10% of that. So realistically, it's just like if they have a turn before a cleanser can cleanse it, they get a 10% injury. Theoretically, that's pretty strong, especially AoE. We're talking about a 40% of the team-wide HP, total HP, being reduced in one turn. But like I said, like, how do you escape the cleansing turn? How do you escape the cleanser, right? Destina is usually like a later cleanser to be drafted as a double cleanse, and and then she would like pretty much hard counter Sharun's turn cycling, and then she doesn't apply buffs and stuff. So unfortunate, the skill enhance gives her an additional 30% raw damage. Like if you're going to invest in her, it would just to be the +3 in my opinion. I don't believe, again, like I said, she doesn't scale on anything in terms of damage mods. So, and then with her attack being that low, it means that no matter what kind of damage mods are returned, unless they're like 3 times damage mods or something, there's no point moloing this. Alright, so here we go, is the S3. So after I digested her kit, I went back and looked at her video. I did some frame by frame, as I usually do, for my art side curiosity. Frame by frame of her S3 animation. I have to definitely say that her S3 is one of the most boring S3s. It's really short, it's not impactful, there's no special background as you can see here. I mean, they put a blue gradient, but like I've mentioned before in some of my more art-based videos that they were like improving the S3 animations, especially the backgrounds, right? Maybe now that I think about it, maybe it's exclusive to ML5s and maybe limited heroes, but if I'm not wrong, this background is slightly boring. And then the animation is boring. So like you basically see like this camera where she's turned to the profile, kind of like back face towards you. She turns her head, you see the side. She turns up and she has this kind of face. She lifts up this branch thing. I don't know what it is. This branch thing, and then she like does this literal frame, and then this big white snake shoots venom with that very low pixel quality as well. Hits the enemies and the animation is over. My explanation of the animation is longer than the actual animation, but I definitely have to say like it's a lower quality animation. So does that mean that Smilegate already sees that she's not that good? I'm not quite sure. Like, does the quality of the animation, reflect to the hero's kit? You think about Politis, for example. Politis even had a kind of like a 3D backing, like where when the opponent gets hit. But actually, you know what? If I think about Politis's background, it's also dark, right? I don't think she has a background. Okay, never mind. You know what? Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Okay. So in this screenshot, like I said, DN has done the S3, and now with some whatever reason, Rimuru gets the turn. Okay. In a real fight, DN, if she did get the S3 and she chooses to do the S3 first. And if she's on Megara's Tome especially, DN will get the turn. And in this team at least, in A, Ravi, Crow, and Rem, DN will get the turn and she'll be able to cleanse. So that makes Maybe Perish just it doesn't work outside of just turn cycling for the next turn, right? If they're not on immunity, I suppose you could jump into the S1, which we'll talk about right now. Now, I think if anything, Sharun's S1 is probably legitimately the best skill that she has. It is also, like, mechanically speaking, the most OP skill that she has, and actually a kind of an OP skill in general. So not just her. It's really the increasing skill cooldown part. Although it is a conditional one, I can see that being very, very toxic. Yeah, so attacks the enemy with up to a 75%. So if you +3 this, and again, I definitely think that if you're gonna invest in her, low Mola hero, right? I think Barrier Max, if Barrier is actually even good, Barrier Max cooldown on S3, maybe even not the S3, maybe just go +3 on the S1, man. I seriously think that the S1 is her strongest area. So up to a 75% chance to inflict poison, venom, sorry, not poison, venom for 1 turn. After attacking, when the target is inflicted with venom, increases the skill cooldowns by 1 turn. So all skill cooldowns by 1 turn, and it's after the attack. So it doesn't have to be that she landed on S3 and then go back to the S1. After any attack, so that's why I'm thinking like a counter set sounds pretty good. After attacking is not the same as after the caster's turn. So I do believe that this does affect a counter. So if, let's say, someone hits your Sharun counters, Venom is procced. After that attack, skill cooldown decrease. I think that's a pretty strong aspect in her kit. Now, a Soulburn, you know, Venom still does the same thing, so I'm not gonna reread that. Soulburn increases the effect chance up to 100% and inflicts venoms for 2 turns. Again, I don't think the Soulburn on her is super great, outside of maybe you want to land it, but just do keep in mind though that if she's gonna be focused as like an injury dealer, especially injury dealer that is based off debuffs, like to some people injury is already a very weak mechanic. Injury is a very strong mechanic when it's coupled with like other things. So for example, in A. Ravi's case, really good damage. With Alencia's case, if you have injury set, her S3 is a defense buff with injury, right? If it's an S1, you have a defense break, double hit, injury, and then Alencia heals now. She didn't used to before, but that's what I mean. It's like, so injury is a decent thing. My SSB is still on injury. If you guys watch my videos and you guys know me, you know my SSB is on injury. I use her in slow fights, so I can punish people who drop too slow. And realistically, Sharun should function that way. Like all her kit is saying that okay, she functions only when, you know, you're drafting around like a 230, maybe 180 to 230 speed heroes, and your opponent is playing the same game. Like that's really where she fits. If she somehow if someone figures out some kind of big brain comp with her, or big brain draft with her, in my opinion, again, is the S1 that really is the money for me. The increased skill cooldown on an S1, even though it is conditional to the Venom, in my opinion, that is very strong. That is very strong. You can almost, again, depends. You can almost like hard counter A. Ravi. We're talking about like A. Ravi, sometimes she can like maybe like 1v4 or whatever. Like with Sharun on your team, she might not be able to. Well, actually no, 1v4 might be too much. Let's say 1v2. If it's like Sharun and like maybe an ML Cowrick or something like that, like left versus A. Ravi, I think the Sharun ML Cowrick team has a potential of winning. It has a potential of winning in my opinion, because remember, barrier from Sharun, and then potentially artifact is Celestine. Okay, if she's on counter, maybe Celestine. Okay. Some people think Idol Cheer for more aggressive play. I personally think that I don't know if her kit allows her to be an Idol Cheer holder, because she doesn't heal. So like in my opinion, like someone like a Ruel for like a slower fight, like an Idol Cheer is a surprise, right? Because the opponent is trying to kill your Ruel, but all your Ruel does is push up a DPS. That could bring a surprise. So I feel like, but Ruel can heal, right? And then it can revive. But I don't think that Sharun has that ability to be an Idol Cheer holder and then yet to be supporting. So I think, at least right now, I'm thinking Celestine as her main artifact, which is kind of good. If I do pull her and if she is usable, I do have a Celestine that I don't use, so that's kind of good. Per artifact, so Sacred Tree Branch, increase effectiveness by 30%. Okay, that's pretty good. It's only if it's max, right? Max limit broke. I think it would be, what would it be, like 18% or something like that? Or 22% or something, if it's plus 15. So let's say you get 1 copy plus 15. I think it's 22. Increase the basic, after using a basic skill, increases the combat readiness of the ally except the caster with the highest attack by 10%. The artifact skill can only apply to 1 hero within a team. So I think what that means is obviously that you can't have like 3 Soul Weavers using this and all 3 of them will push. Only 1 of them will. Now I don't know what the priority is to that, unless I read that wrong. But I think that in terms of herself using this artifact in a PvP scenario, that's kind of, it's not that good, right? It just again goes to show like you either have to build it really fast to be able to turn cycle that, or this is going to be a useful artifact on a PvE Soul Weaver. So like maybe a Singelica team, I don't know, I don't know, some kind of like aggressive healer. So I know that Singelica is I believe that Inos, the 3-star dark Soul Weaver, I believe she's kind of like an aggro Soul Weaver too. I don't remember her kit off the top of my head, but like I think if I remember correctly, she has like attack buff and stuff like that. Like, would this be useful on her? I don't know. Maybe in the future more Soul Weavers, but right now I feel like if you do get Sacred Tree Branch, it feels more like it's less risky to use. Let me put it that way. It's less risky to use if it's in a PvE scenario rather than a PvP scenario, right? So I don't believe that giving her, like, let's say Sharun herself, giving her the 30% effectiveness is gonna really change too much. Like the combat readiness part might be okay, but again, I do believe that with the type of draft you might bring her into and the type of, you know, opponents you might fight, I think that you probably want the Celestine just as a little bit of sustain, you know, kind of like DN on Rod or DN on the Crystal artifact. It's just like it's a little bit of sustain, but that helps, right? It helps. Anyways, so that's my thoughts on Sharun. I think if I can get enough bookmarks, because we already know that the Summer Charlotte is coming next week. If I can get the bookmarks, I think I'm gonna try for her. But yeah, hopefully something I've said has maybe opened up your mind. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about her. I think the predominant feeling towards her is that she's not that good. And I already said I'm just going with what I think are the pros and cons in the certain situations. Like I said, I'm more convinced that someone can make her work if they are a standard player and they're fighting versus standard heroes. And if she's picked 4th, 5th, where it's kind of like a safe counter pick. I would say that like she almost felt like she's supposed to punish people who buff. It almost felt that way with the S2 passive. But like if people like overload on buffs, I still believe that Rimuru and Landy will be chosen over her. Like, you know, those are some of the criteria. It's like, oh, you pick too many buffers? Alright, here we go. Let me take my Landy, or let me take my Rimuru. I don't think she's going to have that same reaction. Landy and Rimuru as a DPS pick can be picked early. Again, like I said, I think unfortunately right now she has to be picked late. And unfortunately, in terms of any sort of RTA tier list, if someone is to formulate RTA tier list, is that the later the pick, the lower the tier, unfortunate. But anyways, that's my initial thoughts for Sharun. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'm gonna end this for the video recording. If you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. And as always, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.